Berlin, December 31st, 1933. Spartacus Olson reporting from the German capital. To cap off his whirlwind takeover of Germany in less than a year, Hitler has now shocked the world by pulling Germany out of essential international peacekeeping cooperation, giving the international system of order a severe blow. He says Germany has been treated unfairly, and until she is, the old order won't guarantee peace. While he has professed a desire for peace, his implicit threats have reignited fears of another war in Europe. At home, his defiance of the international status quo has been celebrated as a crown on German resurgence. The national awakening has now turned outward. Will it mean war? The fourth quarter of 1933 marked the return of an international trade conflict as nation after nation abandoned the international tariff truce that had been in place since May of this year. It began after the failure of the World Monetary and Economic Conference in London in June and the US's subsequent effective abandonment of the truce. Then the trade war that was begun when the US passed the Smoot-Hawley Tariff Act in 1930 ignited again. As the third quarter advanced, many governments, like in the Netherlands, Sweden, France, Brazil, Italy, Germany, the British Empire, and Belgium, stopped pretending to seek multilateral reduction in trade barriers and began using tariffs as weapons to force bilateral concessions. For Hitler, the vacuum created by this growing international crisis presented the perfect opportunity to also abandon other international cooperations, like ignoring the Treaty of Four and on October 14th, pulling out of the Disarmament Conference and the League of Nations, claiming the world has been seeking to humiliate the Reich. When asked by a British journalist if there was any scenario in which Germany would rejoin the international community, the German dictator responded, "If the League of Nations continues on its present course and grows more and more to become a syndicate of promoting the interest of certain states against the interest of others, I do not believe it has a future. In any case, Germany will never again join or take part in an international organization if it is not recognized as a completely equal factor." The real reason for this departure were rooted in Hitler's long-held ideological imperatives. He has repeatedly branded the League of Nations as a Versailles construct, designed to enforce the permanent subjugation of the Reich. In speech after speech, Hitler has expressed disdain for international conventions, calling them tools of Jewish democratic interests that hinder the struggle for existence of the Aryan race. Significantly, the departure isolates Germany and makes Hitler's rearmament program less transparent to the world. To shield this risky isolationism from foreign intervention, he then orchestrated a massive domestic spectacle, a plebiscite and new elections on November 12th, symbolically chosen as it is the day after the anniversary of German defeat in the Great War, designed to prove that the German Volk and its Führer were one. For the election, the regime dissolved the Reichstag and left the state legislatures as hollow shells. Gleichschaltung laws had already frozen them in line with Berlin. The election campaign turned into a totalitarian masterpiece of coordination. For weeks, the entire state apparatus focused on generating a frenzy of approval for the November 12th vote. The international reaction was one of stunned paralysis. The withdrawal struck a severe blow to the League of Nations, which had already been weakened by Japan's departure earlier this year. While the move caused alarm in London and Paris, the Western democracies failed to present a unified front or employ sanctions. In Britain, there was a reluctance to risk war over what some viewed as Germany's legitimate grievances regarding the unequal application of disarmament clauses, leading publications like The Times to even welcome Hitler's assurances of peace, failing to see the aggression lurking behind the rhetoric. With the international lethargy in full view of the German people, the vote delivered a staggering 95.1% yes for withdrawal. While vote manipulation was clearly rampant, the regime successfully and publicly thereby bound the population to its foreign policy course. Following the triumph, the regime moved even further into economic isolation. On December 18th, the Reichsbank cut the share of interest on many long-term foreign debts actually paid in foreign exchange from 50 to 30%, with the remainder credited in blocked marks, tightening an already existing partial transfer moratorium. This further alienated foreign creditors and redirected scarce foreign currency towards raw material imports and rearmament at the expense of conventional debt service. So, on New Year's Eve of 1933, we do not only mourn the death of German democracy, but also the demise of international order and cooperation, slain not only by Hitler and the Nazis, but also by collective national egotism and paralysis of the nations of the world, facing a crisis that concerns us all and should have united rather than divided. With the continued gutting of German federalism and the withdrawals, Hitler's power was once more strengthened, and Germany has removed from their path the international guardrails meant to keep at bay the forces that seek to pull apart the world and plunge it into chaos and war. As one of the many private levels of tragedy of these developments for the German Jewish minority, the legal noose tightened in the shadow of these impersonal foreign policy events. As the regime left the League of Nations, it insulated itself against international oversight and protests regarding minority rights. For instance, the international community had forced Germany, under the Geneva Convention on Upper Silesia, to suspend some anti-Jewish measures there. Even after Germany's exit from the League, those treaty obligations linger on paper, but the instruments of other states to press them is clearly reduced. The codification of the exclusion of Jews and political dissidents from public discourse also continued. On October 4th, the regime passed the Schriftleitergesetz, editor's law, described as the constitution of the Nazi press. The law effectively nationalized the profession. Editors, though still formally employed by publishers, are now treated as performing a public function, must be registered and Aryan, and are subordinated to the propaganda ministry as quasi-state functionaries. They must now legally withhold anything calculated to weaken the strength of the German Reich aboard or at home. Goebbels told the press that they must now not merely inform, but instruct the people. As the November plebiscite campaign went into overdrive, the press was fully coordinated to serve the Nazis. Newspapers received daily directives numbered and signed for, ensuring that every headline supported Germany's withdrawal from the world stage. The effects of this withdrawal from world cooperation drive deeper into the heartland of the German economy, when in December, Reichsbank President Hjalmar Schacht slashed the transfer of interest on foreign debts. He alienated international creditors, but also preserved foreign currency to pay for the import of raw materials Germany needed for rearmament. What it does not do is to address the systematic problems of the domestic economy. Instead of real reform to leverage economic disparity, the Nazis have resorted to cosmetic means to create a sense of solidarity between the members of the German folk. The regime now heavily promoted the winter relief, Winterhilfswerk, to collect money, food, and clothing for the needy, launched last quarter. This is not just charity, it is a plebiscite of the deed, a psychological tool to enforce the people's community by coaxing Germans to redistribute their assets without obvious state forces. Organized by the National Socialist People's Welfare, NSV, the campaign has deployed ubiquitous collection boxes across Germany and issued a slew of themed donation badges, pressuring Germans to give frequently to avoid social ostracization. The populations seemed happy to go along as official unemployment figures continued to drop, aided also this quarter by statistical manipulation through things like the continued removal of women from the workforce. In all, the Nazis have reinforced a narrative that national isolation breeds domestic prosperity, while enforcing conformity through public shaming of non-donors to the winter relief. The withdrawal from the League was a gamble. Some observers have proposed that had the world united and ended the war on tariffs to stand united and curb German ascendancy, the new regime might have collapsed. Instead, the world did nothing, and the German people applauded the move as a sign of a regained national honor. Joseph Goebbels, managing the election, was euphoric. After the November 12th results, he noted that it was unimaginable. I'm scared of the envy of the gods. He met with Hitler later that night and recorded that the Führer put his hands on my shoulders, quite moved, and declared, "We made it. Now we can face the world." The party now feels invincible, having made the German people accomplices in their defiance of Europe and the world. The mood is reflected in the population. Whatever the actual number of people who voted yes, the withdrawal is without any doubt viewed by the public as a redemption of the national shame that was born out of the defeat in 1918 and artificially grown into a narrative of a victimhood through the stab-in-the-back myth. Most seem to be like Hermann Voss, a university anatomist, who expressed intense relief and approval regarding the foreign policy on the day of the vote. This afternoon, we voted for Adolf Hitler's government. After voting, one bought a yes insignia for 5 pfennigs, which was pinned on by an SA man. It is a true deliverance that we are finally out of this League of Nations. How long I have awaited this. Even those who have been hopeful that maybe, just maybe, the German people will at some point reject the Nazi regime now seem to have given up such hopes. Viktor Klemperer, our Jewish professor in Dresden, who had voted no on the plebiscite, recorded his despair at the overwhelming yes result, feeling that the sheer weight of the numbers was crushing his ability to disbelieve the regime's support. I was laid low. I almost believed the figures and held them to be truth. And since then, we've been told in every possible key, this election is recognized abroad. All of Germany is seen to be behind Hitler. Now all of it makes me drunk. I too am beginning to believe in the power and the permanency of Hitler. He may be right, as the vote showed that the support for the regime now goes far beyond actual Nazis and envelops the vast majority who have pride for their country, like Georg Witzmann, a school director in Gotha, who, leading up to the plebiscite, noted that the government has an election slogan that everyone with national feelings must support with an ardent heart, the struggle for the honor and freedom of the Volk and Fatherland. Does one absolutely need to be a national socialist for this? A question answered by Karl Möhring, a student in Göttingen who split his votes using the separate ballots for the plebiscite and the Reichstag. I certainly wanted to vote for the foreign policy of the government, but not for the NSDAP. It has been a masterstroke of foreign policy abroad and manipulative politics domestically. Hitler has gotten away with murder of the international order by striking at a moment when the international community was deeply divided. At home, by linking the popular desire for peace and equality with the regime's survival, Hitler trapped the population. To vote no to Hitler was to vote yes to the emotional yoke of Versailles, a choice few Germans were willing to make. The withdrawal from the League of Nations was the moment the Hitler myth expanded from domestic savior to national statesman. It was a diplomatic revolution that left the West confused and leaves Germany free to rearm in secret, protected by the appearance of monolithic national unity. So, as 1933 ends and snow falls on the swastika flags, the Third Reich stands alone by choice. The bridges to Geneva are burnt. The voices of dissent are silenced, with any opposition shamed into silence, jailed, or exiled. Through the November plebiscite, the German people have formally bound their fate to the dictator, accepting isolation as the price of national pride. The post-war era may soon be over, and we might be on our way towards a new pre-war era. Thus, on this New Year's Eve of 1933, the words of the poet Robert Burns in that oft-sung hymn have clearly been forgotten. We too have paddled in the stream from morning sun till dine, but seas between us broad have roared since auld lang syne. There's a hand, my trusty friend, and give me a hand of thine, and we'll take a good-will draught for auld lang syne. There are no more hands to be given and no draughts to be drunk for old time's sake, for now we stand divided, facing monsters reawakened. May God preserve us. Never forget. I shall return in a week with the next developments in the German Nazi Reich. For some of my broader thoughts on all this and replies to some of your comments under these videos, follow my personal YouTube account here. Also join the Tangos Army so that we can keep on fighting the good fight for history that can help us better understand the world around us and together forge a better future.